Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. We're diving into some tech concepts today, stuff that can seem pretty complicated at first glance, but is actually super important once you wrap your head around it.
That's right. We're all about giving you that shortcut to understanding, right? Like getting straight to those aha moments without having to wade through tons of jargon and technical details.
Yeah, exactly. We respect your time. And today, we're tackling a topic in Python programming that's often overlooked but absolutely essential. Even though it might seem kind of basic, Python indentation.
Yeah, indentation. It's literally just hitting the space bar, right?
Yeah.
How hard can that be?
Hmm.
But here's the thing. In Python, indentation is much more than just making your code look pretty. It's a fundamental part of how the language actually works.
Oh yeah, it's like baked right into the language itself. Unlike some other programming languages where you can kind of get away with messy formatting, Python is really strict about it.
Totally. And that's what makes it so interesting to dig into. We're going to be taking a close look at a really helpful YouTube video from the Savoir-faire digital channel called Video 2 Introduction à la Programmation avec Python Indentation.
Awesome. So today's mission, if you choose to accept it, is to understand exactly what Python indentation is, why it matters so much, and how it directly affects how your Python code behaves. You'll see that mastering this seemingly simple concept is like unlocking a secret door to understanding the structure and logic of Python.
It's one of those foundational things that once you get it, a lot of other things start falling into place.
For sure. So let's break this down. What exactly is indentation in Python? Like when we say indentation, what are we actually talking about?
So in the most basic sense, indentation in Python just refers to the spaces you put at the beginning of a line of code. And yes, it definitely makes the code easier for us humans to read, but in Python, it goes way beyond that.
Right, because in some other programming languages, those spaces are really just for us. The computer doesn't really care about them. It can still process the code even if it's all jumbled together. But Python's different.
Very different. In Python, those spaces, that indentation, is how the computer understands the structure of your program. It's part of the language's syntax, its grammar, if you will. Think of it this way. When you're writing an email or a document, you use things like bullet points or numbered lists to visually group related ideas, right?
Yeah, totally. Makes things so much easier to follow.
Exactly. Python uses indentation in a very similar way. It's like those bullet points and numbered lists. But instead of just being visual aids for humans, those spaces actually tell the computer how the different parts of your code are connected.
I see. So the indentation is like a signal to Python saying, hey, these lines of code that are indented together, they belong together, they're part of the same block.
You got it. It's like organizing your code into these neat little blocks. And those blocks are defined by how much they're indented. Now, this has a huge impact on why indentation is so crucial in Python. There are a few key reasons why this matters so much.
Okay, let's hear them. Why is indentation so important in the world of Python? What makes it so special?
Well, first and foremost, as we've just talked about, indentation is how Python actually understands the structure of your program. It's how it figures out which lines of code belong together and should be executed as a group. Imagine you have a set of instructions that should only run if a certain condition is true. Indentation is what tells Python which instructions are part of that conditional group.
Right, like Python only run this code if this particular thing is true, and these indented lines are the code I'm talking about.
Exactly. And because of this block structure defined by indentation, Python code is inherently very readable and maintainable. Even if you're looking at someone else's code for the first time, the indentation helps you visually parse how the code is organized. In fact, the video we're referencing directly states that une indentation correcte rend le code beaucoup plus facile à maintenir, which means that correct indentation makes the code much easier to maintain.
Makes perfect sense. Good indentation is like a well-organized outline. It just makes everything so much easier to follow. Can you imagine trying to read a book where all the paragraphs were just mashed together with no spaces? It would be a nightmare.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another key reason why indentation is so vital: collaboration. When multiple developers are working on the same project, consistent indentation ensures that everyone's code looks and behaves the same way. The video really emphasizes this point, saying, l'utilisation cohérente de l'indentation permet d'améliorer les révisions de code de débogage et puis les tests. Une indentation correcte garantit la cohérence et la structure du code, ce qui facilite la collaboration entre développeurs. That's a mouthful, but basically it means that consistent use of indentation makes code reviews, debugging, and testing much smoother. Correct indentation guarantees the coherence and structure of the code, which makes collaboration between developers much easier.
Right, so it's not just about making the code look nice for yourself. It's about making sure that everyone working on the project can easily understand and work with each other's code. It's like a shared language.
Exactly. Consistent indentation is a huge part of what makes Python code so readable and maintainable, even across large teams. Now, here's the most important part. If your indentation is wrong, your Python code simply will not work. Python is super strict about this.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely run into those pesky indentation errors before. It's like Python just throws its hands up and says, nope, I don't know what you're trying to do here.
Right, it's like trying to speak a foreign language but getting all the grammar wrong. People might get the general idea of what you're trying to say, but it's not going to be pretty. In Python's case, incorrect indentation throws a wrench in the whole process, and your program just won't run.
So we've established that indentation is super important in Python, but what's the right way to do it? Like, how many spaces are we supposed to use? What's the standard?
Great question. The widely accepted convention in the Python community is to use 4 spaces for each level of indentation. You'll see this almost universally in Python code. It's like the golden rule of Python indentation.
4 spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Now, what about using the tab key? Isn't that the same thing?
Ah, good point. While many code editors will let you use the tab key and will automatically convert it to 4 spaces, it's generally best practice to just use the spacebar and physically type out those 4 spaces.
Even though it's an extra keystroke, why is that?
It all comes down to consistency. You see, different editors and operating systems might handle tabs differently. Some might use 4 spaces, some might use 8, and things can get really messy when you're sharing code or working on different machines. Sticking to 4 spaces consistently avoids all that potential confusion and ensures that your code looks and behaves the same way everywhere.
Okay, that makes sense. So 4 spaces it is. Now the video gives a really nice practical example of how this all works in action, right?
Yes, absolutely. The video starts with a simple variable assignment, x equals 10. This is just a basic line of code that says, hey Python, let's create a variable called x and give it the value of 10.
Okay, pretty straightforward. No indentation needed there, right?
Nope, not for that line. It's just a single independent statement. Then the video shows a line that says, hashtag ceci est un commentaire. This line starts with a hash symbol, hashtag, which in Python means it's a comment. The computer completely ignores comments. They're just there for us humans to add notes and explanations within our code.
Ah, comments. Those are super helpful, like little reminders to yourself or explanations for anyone else who might be reading your code.
Exactly. Now, here comes the interesting part. The next line in the video is, this introduces an if statement, which is like a decision point in the code. It basically says, hey, Python, if the value of x is greater than 5, then do something. And notice the colon at the end of that line. That's really important in Python.
Oh, yeah, I've seen those colons before. They seem to show up a lot in Python.
They do. And they usually mean that an indented block of code is coming up next. That colon's like Python's way of saying, heads up, the following lines are going to be indented and they're all part of this if statement.
So in this case, because x is 10, which is definitely greater than 5, the code inside that if block should run, right?
You got it.
Right.
And the way Python knows which lines are part of that if block is through the indentation. In the video, the narrator presses enter after the if by 5 line, and their code editor automatically indents the next line by 4 spaces. This is where they write the code that should be executed if x is greater than 5, x est plus grand que 5.
So that line will print out the value of x, which is 10, along with the message, est plus grand que 5.
Precisely. Now, the video then goes on to show an else statement, which is like the other side of the coin of an if statement. The else statement is at the same indentation level as the original if statement, and it also ends with a colon. It's essentially saying, okay, Python, if the condition in the if statement is not true, then do this instead.
So in this case, if x were, say, 3, which is not greater than 5, then the code under the else statement would run.
Exactly. And just like with the if statement, the code under the else is indented by 4 spaces to show that it belongs to that else block. The video shows this indented line. Print, x n'est pas plus grand que 5, donc il doit être inférieur ou égal. This line would be executed if x were not greater than 5.
Makes sense. And then there's that last line in the video's example, print fin, which is back at the original indentation level, the same as the if and else statements. What's going on with that line?
That's a really important observation, because that final print line is not indented under either the if block or the else block. It will always execute, regardless of whether x is greater than 5 or not. It's outside of the conditional code blocks.
Ah, I see. So the indentation tells us not only which lines of code are part of which blocks, but also which lines are outside of those blocks and will always run.
That's it. It's all about the visual hierarchy created by that indentation. The video also points out that some code editors, like the Notepad++ editor used in the example, will even draw little vertical lines connecting the lines of code that belong to the same indented block. It's like a visual aid to help you see the structure of your code more clearly.
Yeah, I've seen those lines before in my code editor, and they're super helpful, especially when you start getting into more complicated code where you have if statements nested inside other if statements or loops that contain blocks of code within them. Those visual cues really help you keep track of everything.
Absolutely. They make it much easier to spot any inconsistencies or errors in your indentation, which, as we've discussed, can cause your whole program to crash and burn.
Right. Python doesn't mess around when it comes to indentation. To really hammer home this point about how crucial correct indentation is, the video shows what happens if you intentionally mess it up.
Yeah, they deliberately remove the indentation from the print statement that's supposed to be inside the if block. And what happens?
Boom! Instant error message. Python throws up an indentation error and points right at the line where the indentation went wrong. Case closed.
It's a beautiful demonstration of how strictly Python enforces this rule. Incorrect indentation isn't just a stylistic preference, it's a fundamental error in Python. The video narrator makes a great analogy saying, comme pour langage, si vous voulez parler le langage, vous devez respecter aussi les règles ou bien la syntaxe de ce langage-là. Which basically means that, just like with any language, if you want to speak it, you have to respect its rules, its grammar, or its syntax. Indentation is part of the very fabric of the Python language. Some would argue that this strictness about indentation actually makes Python code more readable and maintainable in the long run.
Yeah, I can see that. It forces everyone to follow the same rules, so the code tends to have a more consistent structure, which makes it easier to understand and work with, especially when you're collaborating with others or revisiting your own code months later. What do you think are some of the potential downsides of this design choice, though? Like, is there ever a situation where this strictness about indentation could be a bit of a pain?
That's a really interesting point. While the enforced indentation brings a lot of benefits in terms of readability and consistency, some developers argue that it can feel a bit limiting compared to languages that use explicit delimiters, like curly braces, to define code blocks. In those languages, you have more freedom to format your code however you like, as long as those braces are in the right places. But in Python, you're kind of locked into that force-based indentation style. But personally, I think the advantages in terms of clarity and reduced ambiguity far outweigh that minor inconvenience.
Yeah, I think I agree, especially when you consider how much easier it makes it to read and understand code, even if it's not your own code. That trade-off seems worth it. And as the video nicely shows, simply putting the indentation back where it belongs immediately fixes the error, and the program runs without a hitch.
Exactly. The cause and effect are very clear. Fix the indentation, problem solved.
So let's wrap up our deep dive into Python indentation today. What's the key takeaway? If our listener remembers just one thing about this topic, what should it be?
The most important thing to remember is this. Indentation in Python is not just about aesthetics. It's a fundamental part of how the language works. It's how Python understands which code belongs together and in what order it should be executed. Consistent indentation makes your code readable, helps you collaborate with others, and most importantly, prevents errors that can stop your program from running. It's really that simple, but it's also that crucial.
I love that. Simple yet crucial. Okay, folks, so we've explored why those seemingly insignificant spaces at the beginning of your lines of Python code are actually incredibly significant. They're the silent but powerful directors of the show.
And here's a final thought for you. Think about how visual organization helps you in other areas of your life. When you organize your desk, or when you structure an essay or a presentation, you're using visual cues to convey meaning and hierarchy. Python's indentation is doing the same thing, but for code. It's bringing that visual organization into the heart of the programming process.
Such a great point. So next time you're looking at some Python code, pay close attention to those spaces. They're not just there for decoration. They're telling you a story about how the code is structured and how it flows.
Now, before we sign off, the video we looked at today mentioned it was also going to cover variables and IDEs, which are integrated development environments. We didn't get into those in this deep dive, but they're definitely worth exploring. Maybe those will be the topics of some future deep dives. Who knows?
Stay tuned to find out. Thanks for joining us today as we explored the fascinating and essential world of Python indentation. Until next time, happy coding!